But what I want to know from you, Johnny, I know you've had questions about Ange Postecoglou over a long stretch of time. No, yeah, you. I'm looking at you, Johnny. Me as well. I mean, maybe a bit of a shorter time than you. But first of all, right now, as it stands, 18th of February, would you sack Ange Postecoglou? And if the answer is yes, which I think it is, just give me a little nod if it is. Is it yes? Come on, we got him back.
Oh no, listen, I can't. It's very difficult because basically, what I would say to you is, do I think Ange is the man? No. Do I think we can sack him right here, right now? The answer is no. Because, it's going to play out, isn't it? He's going to play out this whole the whole of the Europa League. And even if we get beaten by Ipswich, get beaten by Bournemouth, get beaten by Man City, look, our fans have got very short memories. Oh, we lost 7 games, I think it was, between January and May of last year. We had the players back. I was one of those fools, the guy who was turning around to his Arsenal mates and his Chelsea mates saying after the Chelsea game, 2023, was it November 2023? Wait till we get our players back. Then you'll see. And unfortunately, the players came back and exposed what I was worried about right at the beginning. Nothing's changing, and this is not going to work. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people don't agree with it and say I have an agenda. It's not an agenda as such. It's an observation. And football's about opinions, and I don't ever expect everyone to agree with me. But for me, as much as I think that Ange isn't the man, I don't think you can sack him. I really don't. Iriola, for me, for a long time now, has given me Poch vibes. He still does. I think he's a top manager. And I've got to be honest with you, I think Amorim is a very good manager as well. And he has an absolute shit show down there at United. And I don't think even Pep or Ancelotti could sort that mess out at the moment. So stick with him. But I think Ange, when I was watching the game on Sunday, Sim, I know you're very positive and I admire it, but I look at the big picture here and I see any decent team carving us wide open. And quite honestly, if you're watching that game, how was Sonny still on that pitch? I used to manage kids, and it's always hard when you're having to take off the kid when the dad's standing about 10 yards behind you. You're taking off my son. I can't believe it. He's been amazing. And you have to take him off. Come on. As much as you love Sonny, he needed to come off a long while ago. And when we saw Odegaard suddenly come on, oh my God, it was like the whole game lit up. When Odegaard linked up with Jed and the rest, Tell, we looked sprightly. I mean, Odegaard and Tell are former teammates, from France for under 19s, and they have an understanding, and hopefully they'll go on to be great mates and create a fantastic partnership, because that side there of Jed Spence, I like to see him on the right, but even on the left, on his weaker side, Odegaard, Jed overlapping with Tell. I mean, come on, that's exciting. That's exciting for me. But still, we have to tolerate seeing Sonny. I love Sonny. Sonny was, when I heard after the first year he was thinking of going, I was devastated, because I've been bigging him up, and luckily for us, Poch managed to convince him to stay, and it was a great decision. But he looks lost. He looks like a lost soul, and it's a sad sight to see. It's almost like when you look at one of these boxers going into the ring for one too many fights and, please quit. And I'm not saying he should quit, but when you look at Mo Salah and him, only 1 month apart in age, they look like players from different planets right now, and it's a sad sight to see. And I can't understand why Ange didn't bring on Odegaard, with maybe 20 minutes to go. And one last question, one last thing I'd like to throw out there. Is this the last we're going to see of Mikey Moore in Spurs shirt this season?
Well, that's a good question, actually, because he does seem to I mean, he was getting his minutes in the Europa League, wasn't he? And he was getting minutes off the bench. But, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I don't think he even should have had the limited game time that he has had in recent weeks, of getting taken off at half-time in 2 games. But he needs game. You look at Ethan Nwaneri, right? He's doing so well because he's getting the chances and he's getting the game time and he's scoring goals and he's making an impact. And I think Mikey Moore has the ability to do something similar.
He's a believer, right? I don't believe Ange is a believer in the kids, and that's why you bring someone like Pochettino. If you gave that group of kids to Pochettino, I reckon we would have kids in the England setup. I really do. And what's worrying to me is that Mikey Moore deleted his goal that he scored for Spurs, his debut goal off of Instagram, and then 2 days later he deleted his X account. And I know I'm reading into it, and I don't know, but I said then, is this the acknowledgement by him, or has someone said to him, you know what, you've done very well, Mikey, but we're going to put you back into the under-21s now? And has the kid got upset? I'm just saying, I don't know for sure, but I'd be interested to see if he gets any more game time with Timo Werner coming back, Odegaard now fit, Tell, and all the others, and everyone else coming back. Will we even see him on the bench in about 2 or 3 weeks when the big boys come back?
Yeah, I mean, if he sides with Timo Werner on the bench over Mikey Moore, I think that's another one of those black marks against his name for Ange Postecoglou. But the question that I originally wanted to ask you, Johnny, is what does he need to do from now to the end of the season to save his job in your eyes?
I mean, honestly, it's like putting a sticking plaster on a gaping wound. I just don't think that he has the tactical nous and flexibility that's needed from a top manager. I looked at his career at Celtic. I mean, I'm a big Spurs fan, obviously, huge Spurs fan, but I lived in Glasgow for a few years, and I ended up supporting Glasgow Rangers. And so I sort of twin with them. And so when I've been down, I always watch the Old Firm derbies. And I got to tell you, there was not one moment, even when Ange was beating Rangers time after time as their boss, did I ever think, oh my God, I'd love to have Ange Postecoglou as a Spurs boss. And their performances in Europe were poor. And I really don't think right now, and probably people would disagree with me, but I don't think we've been outstanding in Europe this season. I really don't.
I agree.
But a win's a win, and we've done this. Come on, we've had an easy ride. Even Galatasaray, who we got slaughtered by, AZ Alkmaar absolutely wiped them off the pitch. And AZ Alkmaar came to this stadium with 3 of their top players missing, and we managed to beat them 1-0 with a penalty. I don't know. I think he's going to stay. I'm still completely baffled as to why a manager with a minuscule comparison to some of the great managers that have been dismissed at this club over the last few years, namely Conte, Mourinho, and Pochettino, with better win percentages and less support financially in the transfer market, have all been dismissed. And yet, for some reason, this manager has been given a pass. And listen, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Ange goes on to lift the Europa League, I will be delighted, and I will come on every channel and say I got it wrong. I don't have a problem with being wrong. I want Spurs to be a success. whoever the manager is, whether I like him or not, whatever the player is, I'm happy to come around and say, you know what, I got it wrong. In fact, I think I came on your channel and said, you know what, I think Timo Werner could actually do a job for us. I mean, how wrong was I? I mean, he can run quick.
You were very wrong.
I was very wrong. I mean, the only thing he forgot to take with him was the football.
No, he takes that off the pitch when he dribbles it off the pitch.
Yeah,
he takes it.
No, but listen, he's going to stay. I would like to see a new manager come in the summer. Obviously,
regardless of what he does, only Europa League can save him. You reckon?
I reckon the Europa League will save him, unless there's something that we don't know. And let me tell you something: if the Qataris coming in, they ain't keeping Ange Postecoglou.
George, where are you at with it? Where are you at with Ange? And in terms from now until the end of the season, what does he need to do to save his job?
Yeah, no, for me, the turning point, I was a big advocate of Ange up until a few weeks ago, to be honest. I think the turning point for me was the Liverpool and Aston Villa games. And I know, obviously, the result, for me, I didn't really look at the results, and it wasn't like the result is what killed me. It was just the decision-making in the games, the mentality from the team, the coaching. I think the coaching's been a consistent issue for me. I don't feel like he's actually coached any players to be better, and that's where my main problem is with Ange. Is I think tactically he's shown that he can adapt at times. The adaptations aren't good enough, like Johnny said. He's missing that tactical nous and that depth to compete with the top managers in the Premier League at the moment. Even I think like a Thomas Frank from Brentford probably tactically is a lot better than him, just missing a lot of the players. But with Ange, my biggest issue has been him actually coaching players. I think a lot of the young players we have, and when you sign a lot of young players, you naturally expect the coach to bring the best out of them. I don't know if he's doing that with many of them in particular. I think a lot of them are just progressing as they would in their careers, regardless of the managers they got. So when you look at Mikey Moore, for example, although I think he's had some good opportunities, do I think he could have had more? Yes. Do I think that he could have been coached better? I think our whole attack should be coached better. I think Brennan Johnson has consistently made the wrong decisions in the final third, but I think maybe that's because he's not being told to make the right decisions, and he's not really been worked on that 1v1 coaching on, you know, what to do when you get the ball, the dribbling and that type of aspect. So what he needs to do to save his job, for me, definitely when you win the Europa League, I think that's the only thing he can do. The Premier League's all but done now. As you guys said, with 13 points off 6 or 7 play, that's a 4-point swing. That's 4 games swing. We need those teams to lose 4 games and us to win 4 games. I don't know where I can see Tottenham winning 4 games in general, let alone win 4 more than the teams that are way above us. So that's where the issue lies, is we're so bad and so far below where we should be. The Premier League's not even salvageable, because the best position we could probably get is 9th, maybe 10th, and that's a horrid season in itself. But looking at the Europa League, it goes to show historically, away from home in Europe, we are terrible. I mean, we lost to Dynamo Zagreb with no manager. Like that's it couldn't get any worse than that, if we're being honest. We've lost to FC Basel when we've had Prime Bale running down our flanks. Like I don't really have too much confidence in Spurs, and particularly this team, when the mentality is all over the place. They didn't look like they wanted to go into that Liverpool and Aston Villa games and really win. So when we get a tough fixture away from home in Europe, whether that it could be AZ away from home, it could be Galatasaray away from home, or if we're talking about later rounds, we could get a Lazio, we could get a Bilbao, one of these big top teams. I'm not filled with confidence that this team is going to go out there and have the confidence to get the job done. So for Ange, it's not really looking good. It doesn't really look like the way that the season's going to play out, that he is going to be deserving of having a job after it. But I am with Johnny in saying that it doesn't make sense to sack him now or sack him in between the next couple of weeks, because any manager that does come in, it's not like they're going to be able to have a sustained improvement across the season, and you're not really going to be able to evaluate how good they are at the end of the season. So just let Ange play out the season. We can evaluate the options at the end of the season, look to bring in what managers are available, and that's the biggest thing. No managers are going to want to come in with 2 months left of the season to go. It's not like we have a relegation battle. They can't salvage anything. There's no target for them to aim for. So we're going to have to wait till the end of the season to evaluate what potential managers could come in. And then that's another issue for me, is because the managers out there, I don't think there's a wide pool of managers that are going to want to come to Spurs. Not top managers anyway, because they're seeing what Levy and what's happened to Conte. They're seeing what Mourinho. We are the graveyard for top managers. There's so many managers that come. Nuno's left, he's in second place. And Conte's top of his league. Jose Mourinho is in second place. Like, every manager that's leaving Spurs is in a better position than when they were with us. So when you look at it, it's like, will we be able to attract that top manager? It's going to be tough. And Champions League football is where they want to play, or Europa League football is going to be where they want to play. So if we've got no European football, and we're going to have a low budget, and we're not ambitious, it's just a recipe for disaster. So it's hard to have hope on that sense, but we can only, hope and pray that Ange does turn the season around. And look, if he wins Europa League, like John said, I'm more than happy to be wrong, because I've backed Ange for so long thinking that he could get it right, but I'm just convinced that it's not going to work out with this club in particular.
Do you feel, though, like, even if we don't win the Europa League, but give a good fist of it, but show a good level of consistency in the league from now to the end of the season, and maybe by the end of it you're looking back and saying, well, it really was just the injuries that derailed us, would that be enough for you to say, you know what, keep him in a job for at least till next season?
I just think from what we've seen enough of Ange to know that, again, the coaching is a problem. I look at our defenders, even our best players, Romero. You look at like a Pedro Porro. Pedro Porro has made the same mistake defensively since he's joined. The same thing. He doesn't get goal side. Like, Johnny was a coach. It's one of the first things you teach a kid in an 11-a-side game is when you defend, get goal side of your man. Pedro Porro's not done this for 18 months. So I just have to question the coaching. And if it's not Ange, it's the team around him. Matt Wells, Miles Yedinak, Ryan Mason. There's no surprise. They're all inexperienced. So if you're not going to sack Ange, then you need to bring better people around him to then make his game even better, because I think we're just being really naive at this moment in time and thinking that these young coaches are going to all of a sudden become a competitive team. I just don't see it happening.
Sim, what do you reckon? What does he need from now to the end of the season to save his job?
I think if he wants to guarantee his job for next season, regardless of what we do in the league, he has to win Europa League. If he doesn't win Europa League, he's leaving that opportunity to sack him open, I think. So I think if he wins that Europa, I can't see us sacking him. He'll be our most successful manager statistically since the 80s, like in terms of winning a trophy.
Good old Keith Birkinshaw. Ange will probably walk out if we win the Europa League saying there used to be a football club there, mate.
Exactly. So I think if he wins Europa League, I don't think anyone can turn around and demand him being sacked, or anyone can can blame the hierarchy for keeping him on, because I think he would have been in Champions League football for next season. He would have done the remit for this season, which is win a trophy and get back in the Champions League, however way you do it. And obviously win the Europa League.
Unorthodox way to do it.
But winning Europa League is obviously the best way to do it. If you offered everyone beginning of the season, you win Europa League or finish top four, everyone would have said win Europa League. That would have been the preference. I think he's capable of doing it. I think obviously the round of 16 comes around in 3 weeks' time. I think we'll see what kind of condition Romero, Van de Ven are in, and Solanke in when that round comes through. If they're not fit for the round of 16, if we can get through that round without those three, and then all of a sudden we have them fit for like the quarterfinal stage, and also maybe we're building some momentum in the league, then maybe we could harness that. And I do think when it comes to the squad we have, it is probably one of the stronger ones in the Europa League. And if we can start to overwhelm teams, I know there are some good teams in Europa League, as George mentioned. I think Lazio, Bilbao, all good teams that I think can be definitely our equal when it comes to these knockout stages.
I don't even want to meet Fenerbahce at this point. Jose Mourinho against us in the Europa League, no thanks.
Yeah, I think these teams are not going to be easy by any stretch, and I think for sure they can beat us, no doubt about it. But also we could also, on our day, I think we can beat them if we can play some of the football we were playing early in the season. I think we can blow teams away. I think we've shown that, especially at home. So I think, away from home in Europe, it hasn't been pretty. But if we can kind of get away in these away games, either getting a draw or only losing by a goal and then overwhelm teams at home, I think that can be really great for a two-legged tie. And I think we can do something in this Europa League. I really believe that. I think even maybe when it goes to the last stages, semi-finals, finals, when mentality comes into it and experience comes into it, do these players have that kind of mentality to get us over the line in those situations? I think obviously that remains to be seen, and the jury's definitely out on that. But in terms of us having a deep run in that competition and getting to that kind of stage, I really believe we can do that. I think we've got a good chance of getting to those stages. So maybe by the time we get to those stages, we'll have a bit of momentum behind us, and we'll have a bit of energy with the squad. If we have a fully fit squad, if they've been rotated in that time, and we're using the squad a bit better, and we've ironed out a few of the issues we're having tactically, then I think we can have a really good crack at that Europa League. When it comes to the league, I think, obviously, I agree with George. I think at this point, you got to say the league season's been completely derailed, and anything more than a 9th, 10th place finish is going to be really hard to achieve. I would just say I would be looking for, in terms of consistency, just get a solid 2 points per game, I think. Show that...
to save his job.
Huh?
Is that enough to save his job?
That and a deep run in Europa League, I would say.
If we do that and lose in the semi-final final of the Europa League.
If he's getting 2 points per game, if he shows he can have that level of consistency where 2 points per game is pretty much top 4 form, I think, over a season, and I think that is probably what we were looking for the majority of the season. So I think if he shows a fair level of consistency, gets around 2 or probably over 2 points per game, that's like 27 points probably from now to the end of the season, and has a deep run in the Europa League, then maybe he's got a case to say, look, if you look at the form over this period, I showed some consistency. I showed I can get a tune out of this team, and as well, I married that with a deep run Europa League. And depending on how we went out and all these kind of things, I think he's got a case to say, if you back me in the transfer window, you give me players to rotate and all this stuff, I can really. I can show that I can do something in the league next season. Then he's got a case. But if we still are losing, a third of our games or something like that, and not winning, not showing any sort of consistency whatsoever, and as well, we go out, especially if we go out early in Europa League, I think we probably got to say at the end of the season, look, we gave it a good go. We gave you every opportunity, and it hasn't worked, and we probably got to go another direction. But I still think he's got opportunities to save himself from now to the end of the season. And I think, I do think that we're going to see an upturn in form. Obviously, it's hard not to after the form we've been on. But I'm really hopeful that not only, I think, is the fact that we're going to have players back as well. These players haven't been playing that much, and maybe they're going to have a bit more energy and a spring in their step, and I think it's going to reinvigorate the players that have been waning as well over these last 2 months. I as well think there are a lot of teams above us, like Chelsea, like Bournemouth, who are really suffering from really bad injury crisis. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if their form starts to turn as well. And I'm not saying we're going to finish above them, but I'm saying we're going to come up against these teams in the coming weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if they start to wane a bit, and we can maybe capitalise on that kind of thing. So I think with our players coming back, with other teams maybe starting to get hit by injuries and their form starting to wane, with the Europa League still very much there, I think there's a lot to fight for us this season. And I know there are tactical issues. I know what Johnny's saying. And I think for sure, I think first of all, I think every team in the league, there's no perfect formation. There's no perfect tactic that can't be exploited. I think every tactic has a flaw, 100%. I think our flaws have been completely exacerbated by the fact that this injury crisis has completely exposed the flaws for what they are. And I think when this system doesn't have peak energy and peak intensity, it looks a complete joke. And I think that's what we've seen over these last 2 months. But I don't think that's the case when we do have a fully fit squad, and we do have players who have that energy to run the yards that this system requires. And whether that's sustainable or not, that's obviously the jury's still out on that. But over a short period, which the next 2-3 months is, can we get the most out of this tactic and this formation and see the benefits of it? I really believe we can. And I think you're going to see that. I'm really hoping you're going to see the benefits of this really intense system over the next 2-3 months. And I get there's still kind of question marks over a whole season when you're playing 2 games a week. Is it sustainable? Is it going to be found out? And I think based off this season, there's definitely a case to say it's not sustainable, and you can't keep that intensity up for 2 games a week and all these different things. But as well, I think all great managers. I think Ange. I think people. I know he's an experienced coach, and I know he's nearly 60 and all this stuff, and I know he's married to his system. But throughout his coaching career, he hasn't just been. He's stuck to one formation his whole coaching career. In some teams, he's played three at the back. In some teams, he's developed this way of playing throughout his career. So there's nothing for me to suggest that, give him time to analyse these issues that we're having, and he can make a few tactical tweaks, and maybe those issues can be resolved. Given that time. I think over the last few months, it's been very difficult to do that. We've had very little training. We've had a knackered squad. It feels like whatever we've done, tactical tweaks and stuff, it doesn't really matter when the team is just running on empty at the moment. Whatever you do, it seems as though they're struggling to maintain just the normal standards of Premier League football, let alone the intensity of any system we want to play. So I think it's been really tough to judge over these last 2 months. I think the whole fan base has been beaten and beaten into a pulp in terms of loss after loss. And I think with each loss, it's only so much pain a lot of fans can take. And Ange has definitely lost support along the way in these last 2 months. And I understand it, because with each loss, you're going to lose more and more fans. You're not going to gain fans with every loss. That's the reality. You're only going to lose fans. I'm still there. I'm still with him. I still think he can turn this around. But he's got to show it now, and it's on him. He's got the players back. He's got, he's going to be coming up against teams with big injury problems now. He's going to have players to choose from. He's going to have rotation options. So the excuses are going to be running out from now to the end of the season. So it's now the time to show it for him.
I get the feeling that even if we don't win the Europa League and just go far, like quarters, semis, final, and not end up winning it, I do feel that, I don't think we will do this, but I think if we does go for 2 points a game, like you're saying, from now to the end of the season, I feel that Spurs stick with him going into next season. And I feel that they'll basically lean on the fact that it was the injuries that massively hampered him. And if he can show a consistent level in the league of 2 points per game, then they'll bank on that, bring him a few new signings going into next season, that he can replicate that into next season. I think they'll bank on that.
I think the reality is, as much as there's a large kind of noise externally from the fans, us, let's be honest, we're calling for his head, obviously because of the not me personally, but obviously as a fan base, there's a lot of fans calling for his head, because that's what we're used to.
Now we know what he really thinks.
Huh?
Now we know what he really thinks.
I'm saying that's what we're used to, right? When a manager is in this kind of form, they get sacked. That's what this board has always done, and so that's what we used to, and so that's what we expect when, as a fan base, right? Then that comes with in a way that comes with expectation. You're in this kind of form, you're going to get sacked, and you deserve to get sacked, because if these other managers got sacked for not as bad form as this, and they supposedly deserved it because they got sacked, that means they deserve to get sacked, and so that means Ange with this form deserves to get sacked. But in reality, we haven't really heard anything from this hierarchy or the board or anything in terms of reports or anything to suggest that they want to sack him or he's in danger of his job. So I think you're probably right. I think if he does show a level of consistency in terms of 2 points per game, regardless of the Europa League, he might still be in a job for next season. There's a good chance. I do think if we embarrass ourselves in the Europa League and let's say we get knocked out, we get really tactically outclassed and we get battered by a certain team who maybe aren't a Lazio or Bilbao.
Or if you just go out in the next round to one of Galatasaray, Alkmaar, Sociedad or Midtjylland.
Yeah, I think the noise might be too much. Maybe, I don't know. But at the moment, I think you're right. I think there is no suggestion that the hierarchy want to get rid of him. And I think they want to give every opportunity.
That's potentially because of the lack of options. Because when we've looked previously, the only reason he acted on the Pochettino was because Mourinho was around, and he made that happen within 48 hours. With Nuno's, because he tried to bring Conte in a few months ago, didn't happen. Then he managed to then convince Conte with the Paratici. I think personally, if Thomas Tuchel was still out of a job, or a Julian Nagelsmann was still out of a job and wasn't in with Germany, I think we would have made the change already. I think the board would have reacted and been like, all right, let's go. We're going to go a bit ambitious and bring someone else in who can actually take this team forward. I generally don't think that the noise has been as bad from the hierarchy. It's generally because of lack of options.
I think there's a couple of things. I think it's that. I think you're probably right. If Iraola was on a free right now, maybe we would have already pressed that button potentially. I think it's a couple of things. I think it is that. I think it's the fact that Ange as well. I don't think the board are in the mood to pay out another manager like they did with Mourinho and Conte. I think that's definitely plays into it. But I also think I do think genuinely there probably is an admission from the hierarchy that definitely we've been going in the wrong direction over the last 5 years with the way we've been going about how we've been approaching kind of the direction of this club, and with how the hierarchy do run things, right? We know that when you have managers like Conte and Mourinho, if you're not going to basically spend as ruthlessly as the likes of City and Liverpool and teams above us, then there's no point having these kind of managers like Conte and Mourinho, because they're never going to close the gap in terms of how they coach, just pure with the way we spend, right? So if we are going to operate in the way we operate, which is spending smartly, buying young players and all these kind of things, and if that's what we want to do, then you're going to have to give a manager a good amount of time to get that project up and running, and it's not going to happen really in the amount of time they've given Ange. And I know we want to always see progress and all these different things, and we think progress should be linear, and you want to see always an uptick every season. And look, I think we're right as fans to demand that. I think as well the hierarchy have probably acknowledged that the direction we've been going in needed a complete reset, needed a 180 turn, and that was going to in itself potentially cause a lot of problems in the short term, which needs to be ironed out. Any manager was going to come in was probably going to hit a certain wall that Ange has hit in the time frame that Ange has been in the club, and you're going to have to ride through that. Allow that manager to ride through that storm and correct these issues and figure out these problems without having that pressure of constantly, if you don't figure out in the short term, you're going to be sacked, and allow him to iron out those issues. And I understand that it becomes a point where it gets that bad where you have to basically admit that this manager isn't the right guy to head this project, and you have to just go in a different direction. But I think the hierarchy also acknowledge that you look at the best managers right now. They've been given money as well, but the main thing as well, they've been given time to sort out these issues. They've been given many, many years, not just 2 years. They've been given 3, 4, 5 years, and that's how they've gotten themselves to the top. And we need to do that ourselves. We need to give the best chance to do that with any manager that we have, instead of keep firing every 18 months and continue this cycle. So I think that also plays into it. But I think you're right. I think, knowing this hierarchy, I think if there was a manager ready and waiting with top-class pedigree, there's a good chance they probably would have pushed that button already.
Yeah, there's one thing having a manager, available, but there's another thing convincing him to come, and it goes back to George's point about this club being a graveyard for managers, and I feel like it's going to be a hard sell trying to get one of these managers to come to Tottenham Hotspur. You look at Iraola, how do you expect to look at what the work he's doing at Bournemouth, right? Is he going to jump out of there and come to Tottenham? You're looking at any manager right now, you're looking at the last few manager searches that we've had, we've always got the second, third, fourth choice manager that we've wanted. So I think that's another aspect of why they are sticking with Ange Postecoglou. But I mean, Johnny, do you feel the same? Do you feel that if he does get something like 2 points a game and he shows some consistency from now until the end of the season, that they'll stick with him?
I'd like to say, first of all, Simeon, you're wasted here on Tottenham TV, mate. You should be a defence lawyer.
That's not the first time I heard that.
I've just got on now. I mean, I don't even bet, but after listening to that defence, I'm just about to make a bet on Ange winning the treble next year. Oh, listen, look. It's about games about opinions, and ours definitely differ. On that respect, I've admitted I don't believe he's the man, but I also admitted that you can't sack him now. I have not seen. This is not a blip, guys. Right? Oh, the injuries. Where? Right? Tell me, what's the story, Sim, between January and May of last year? What was the story then?
I'll tell you the story right now. We had a very good start to the season, right?
We all know about that. That's why.
I just look, when you're defending Ange, you have to bring up the first 10 games. I think that's just the natural order of things. But we had the first 10 games. We then, in that Chelsea game, obviously, famously, we lost Romero, we lost Van der Ven, we lost Udogie, we lost Maddison. We had a little mini injury crisis, I think it's fair to say. Not as bad as it was this season, but obviously it was a little mini period. And in those next few games, we lost 4 out of the 5 games with a draw at the Etihad in between that. Even though the performances in those games weren't bad, we lost those 5 games after taking the lead. I think it was a record, 5 games in a row taking the lead, and we lost. Then, after those that 5-game period, we got Romero back. I think we got Udogie back from suspension. I think so. We're only really missing Van der Ven and Maddison in that period. But for the next 16 league games, we were hitting 2 points per game after that 5-game period of after the mini crisis. So actually, we actually had consistent form all the way up until I think it was the end of March, beginning of April. We had really consistent form. We had 10 wins, 3 draws, and 3 losses. That's top 4 form for the 16 games. So it wasn't just the 10-game period last season where we were good. It was actually after that mini injury crisis, we actually did hit some consistent form. Then at the end of the season, I think 5 of our last 7 games were against the top 5. And in all honesty, we were terrible in those games, no doubt about it. We lost to Fulham away 3-0, Newcastle 4-0, Liverpool 4-2, City 2-0, and Arsenal 3-2. But I would say on the face of it, as much as those performances were terrible, and a lot of those games they were over by half time, we were playing some really tough games, and we were playing some of the top teams away from home. So it's not exactly like it wasn't exactly like it was a surprise we lost those games.
Not brilliant, Sim. Brilliant. Listen, I'll read it. Look.
I can do this all day, Johnny.
I know you can. Listen, the 15th of May, I found a tweet here from the 15th of May.
Yeah.
And I put here, losing out on a Champions League place was not about last night's defeat to Man City or Spurs fans. And it was your refusal to change tactics. 5 defeats in our last 6 games. Only led once at half-time this whole year. Only 1 clean sheet in 20 games. Only wins in the last 10 games were against Luton, Burnley and Forest. And, you know, this isn't a phenomenon. You know, this isn't a blip. You know, at one stage before these last 2 wins, we'd had 9 wins in the last 9 months. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. I hear what you're saying, Sim, and I obviously there's going to be a counter argument to everything.
But Johnny, I get it. 9 wins in 9 months, but before the injury crisis, we were 6th, and we were 3 points off second. Like we weren't. It wasn't like before the injury crisis we were terrible anyway. We were in a decent position.
What did you see apart from beating the worst Manchester City team that I've ever seen? Or beating, I was at Old Trafford when we won 3-0. That's the worst Man United team I think I've ever seen. They were fantastic performances. I'm not going to deny it. But they gave us a full sense of hope in those games.
I mean, we beat Villa 4-1. We beat West Ham 4-1. We beat Everton 4-0. Like there wasn't just those games. We were playing well into a lot of other games as well.
What about resting players for Ipswich in the Europa League and then come in and get beaten at home?
Yeah, that wasn't good. I agree. And he has to take.
I was at Palace. You were at Palace, weren't you, Ben?
Yeah.
You were at Palace, Ben Sim. There was a team that hadn't won all season. And but
they're a good team. Look at them now. They're in great form.
Ipswich.
Yeah, but are we saying if we would have beaten them, they wouldn't be on this form? They're a good team.
No, I'm just saying.
They probably weren't getting the results they should have at the beginning of the season.
The performance was absolutely shocking.
Yeah, we were bad. No doubt about it. I'm just saying we lost to Palace. Don't get me wrong, and it was a bad performance.
How long can you?
But if they're not a terrible team.
But the thing is, when you go on about you're not going to make excuses, and as a manager. And then you go on to make those same excuses about your players being out. And, I don't hear Iriola with a much... Listen, look, Iriola, Bournemouth, train in a park, right, more or less. Okay, get dressed in a porter cabin. They have 11,000 seats a stadium. And they have an injury crisis where, they sold their best player to us for 65 million. And their 2 replacement strikers are both injured. I don't hear him ever complain about an injury crisis. And what I see is a guy who's tactically astute to change the game. I mean, I watched the
John, you add European football to Irola and you see if he can keep up the same results.
I just think that
I agree with that.
I do think though that this is a manager that thinks on his feet, and he's watching the game. And also, I know it's a bugbear of mine, but I've never ever watched a football team as a manager ever, and sat there with my hands in my pockets when my team are imploding, scratching my head, thinking that my kids or the players are going to sort it out for themselves with my interjection. And when I watch it, when it's all going Pete Tong, and I see him standing there and not saying anything, I'm not asking him to be a Mikel Arteta. But I'll tell you something. When Arsenal were playing the other day, and there was a break in play, it's 0-0. It's not happening for Arsenal. Brings on Marino, and he calls them over as a break of play, and he's talking to every single one of them. Like, you're not here, you should be here. I want you here, I want you there. He was talking to every single one of them, and they're all listening. And whatever he said in that moment, it changed the game. It changed the game, and they scored those 2 goals. I want him to be a success, but there's too many things that say to me, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. I wish and I hope that I'm wrong. That's all I can say.
No, it is, Johnny. I feel like Ange, in those moments when he's sort of just hands in pocket, similar to like an Ancelotti, he feels like he doesn't need to coach the players.
I'll put them in the same breath.
Not in the same breath, but I just mean with regards to they don't feel the need to coach those players in the moments because they've already portrayed the instruction of what they want. They just believe the players know their instruction. They just need to carry it out. I think Ange lacks that in-game adaptability to react to what is actually going on in the game, to tell players to change what they want because he does want to change from his principles. We saw that in the Liverpool game when he said, oh, I tried this, and this is what happens when you defer from your principles, so I'm going to go back to how I want to play. And then Aston Villa played out, and we lost the way he wanted to play, but obviously he was clearly proud of himself and the boys for just going out there and trying and doing the Ange, so we are, mate, type of stuff. So I agree with you. I do think that he needs to learn to just be a bit more adaptable in the game, talk to players, be a bit more vocal, because it does come across as a bit of arrogant at times. He's just like, oh, I don't need to do this, I'm above this. The players know what they need to do anyway, which I think players need to be reminded sometimes. And there has been times that I'm seeing him coach instructions out of players, the likes of Brennan Johnson and so on. But I just think it's not enough. I do agree with you, Johnny. I just think it's not enough.
But, it's one thing, leaving Vinicius Jr. and Joe Bellingham to get on and do their thing, to Timo Werner and Brennan Johnson. We're talking about levels here. And I don't expect, like I said, I don't expect him, like people say, oh, what do you expect him to do? Screaming and shouting and waving his arms about. No, I'm expecting some interaction. I'm not asking him to shake up the world. But I am expecting when it's not going right, when there's a break in play. Why am I got to sit there, in a game when we're losing and the winning manager, the team that's ahead, is giving more instruction to the team. They're calling them over in that moment. And our manager is saying nothing in a break of play. I don't get it. Some people.
I think that's a poor. I don't know if that's a fair criticism. I've seen him shout plenty of stuff in the sidelines, and I was actually watching an Ali Gold.
Don't pass backwards, Sim. Do you remember that one? Don't pass backwards. Now
that's it. Isn't that enough? No, I'm joking.
5 minutes we're passing backwards, and he's saying, "Jack."
I felt he's got more animated as his Spurs tenure's gone on, though, and the more frustrated he's been getting.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I think he does talk. Maybe he doesn't get the whole team together, maybe like Arteta does at breaks in play, but he definitely does shout things from the sidelines. He has become a bit more animated in recent weeks. I think I've definitely found that. And look, sometimes managers, as you say, sometimes are like Ancelotti, where they just raise an eyebrow and it seems to change everything. And sometimes it's like you're an Antonio Conte, where every single second of the game you have to be shouting some sort of instruction. But I don't think that matters too much to how good of a manager you are. I think every manager has their own way of dealing with things on the touchline. And just because he doesn't do a certain thing, I'm not going to sit here and say he's bad because he's not doing what I would want to do when I'm on the touchline. I think it's just each manager has their own style. It's just about, for me, those things don't mean much. It's more about what you think tactically and all these different things, and how you think the setup is, and that's all fair game, that's all fair criticism. But I just think a lot of people like to attack his demeanor sometimes when we lose games. Oh, he looks at the floor and all these different things, and oh, he doesn't shout enough from the touchline. I just think those are just things to throw mud at him, which I think when you're winning, I don't think anyone cares about.
Listen, look, it's not about I've not seen this in a manager. Okay, when it's going wrong, I understand. When it's going right, fine. But, you know, what have you ever done in your life when you sat there and you can see it's going wrong, where you just stood there and you know, if you saw your kids about to cross the road and they're not at the zebra crossing, there's a car coming, right? You're going to shout, stop, or you're going to interact. You know, it's very difficult to watch something that you're creating. Maybe that's the wrong analogy, obviously. But I'm just saying I found it almost impossible when I was managing kids of different ages, to sit there and not, when it's going wrong, not to say anything to them, to give them that coaching. And I hear what you're saying, they're professional footballers, but, you know, I don't know whether when I was 19 or 18, 19 years of age, I went out with good intentions, and 10 minutes down the road, I've forgotten what I was instructed to do, because your mind's all over the place, right? But he expects them to go out for like 90 minutes and strike their stuff and remember everything, and it's not happening, and he's not guiding them.